become death, the destroyer of worlds.
The Destroyer of Worlds, July 16th, 1945, 5:30 a.m. The desert of New Mexico, usually silent and forgotten, was holding its breath. This place was known as Jornada del Muerto, the journey of the dead man. In the pre-dawn darkness, a group of scientists and military personnel huddled inside bunkers, their eyes fixed on a steel tower standing miles away.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The countdown ended, and for a fraction of a second, the sun seemed to rise from the earth itself. A blinding flash of light erased the darkness, followed by a thunderous roar that shook the ground for 160 kilometers. A massive ball of fire surged upward, twisting and expanding into a terrifying mushroom cloud that clawed nearly 12 kilometers into the sky. The heat was so intense that the steel tower holding the bomb evaporated instantly, and the desert sand melted and fused into green glass. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the thin, chain-smoking physicist leading the project, watched the destruction he had created. He had expected an explosion equal to 0.3 kilotons of TNT. What he witnessed was almost 50 times stronger, nearly 20 kilotons of pure devastation. As the shockwave rolled outward and purple fire churned through the sky, a verse from the ancient scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, echoed in his mind.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
To understand how a man reaches the point of becoming death, one must look back to the beginning. The boy who loved minerals decades before fire consumed the desert, Julius Robert Oppenheimer, was a lonely child in New York City. Born in 1904 to a wealthy German Jewish family, he was a true child prodigy. While other 10-year-old children played games, he immersed himself in advanced physics and chemistry. His knowledge of mineralogy was so exceptional that, at just 12 years old, he was invited to lecture at the New York Mineralogical Club, a room filled with adult experts. Oppenheimer moved through life at a speed few could match. He completed a 4-year degree at Harvard University in just 3 years, mastering chemistry, physics, philosophy, and literature along the way. But beneath the brilliance, there was darkness. Oppenheimer struggled deeply with depression and self-destructive tendencies. At one point, he confessed to his brother, "I need physics more than friends." He remained isolated in his world of equations until the 1930s, when the rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany shattered his intellectual bubble. As Jewish scientists like Albert Einstein and John von Neumann fled Europe for America, Oppenheimer realized that physics could no longer be separated from politics. "I started to understand how deeply political and economic events affect people's lives," he later wrote. He began donating money to labor unions and attending left-wing meetings, a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The letter that changed the world tipped toward chaos in 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland. But the true turning point had come 1 month earlier, quietly, in silence. Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard wrote a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him that the Nazis were working on nuclear weapons. The warning was unmistakable: if Hitler got the bomb first, the world would be lost. Roosevelt acted immediately. The race had begun. The American government started funding research into uranium. But the challenge was enormous. Natural uranium consists mostly of uranium-238, which is useless for a bomb. Less than 1% is uranium-235, the highly unstable isotope needed for an explosion. Scientists now had to separate these two nearly identical materials, a task that many believed was scientifically impossible at the required scale. By December 1941, after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, what had begun as a scientific experiment became a military necessity. The Manhattan Project was born. The secret city General Leslie Groves, a strict and uncompromising military officer, was appointed to lead the project. He needed a scientific director, someone capable of controlling the world's brightest, most eccentric physicists. Despite serious concerns about Oppenheimer's left-wing past, Groves chose him anyway. "This project cannot happen without Oppenheimer," Groves insisted. They needed a location. Oppenheimer suggested the Pecos Valley in New Mexico, a land of mesas and mountains where he had spent part of his youth. There, they built Los Alamos, a secret laboratory completely cut off from the outside world. At the same time, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the government constructed an entire secret city where tens of thousands of workers labored to separate uranium, most of them never knowing what they were actually building. The pressure at Los Alamos was unbearable. They were developing 2 different bombs. The first, little boy, used uranium-235 in a gun-type design, smashing two subcritical masses together to trigger an explosion. The second bomb, Fat Man, relied on a newly discovered element, plutonium. This was far more complex. Plutonium could not simply be fired together, it would react too quickly and fail. Instead, the scientists had to invent an entirely new concept, implosion. Powerful explosives would compress a plutonium core inward, forcing it into critical mass. It was a theory that had never been tested before. And yet, the fate of the world now depended on whether it worked. The day the world ended, that decision led them back to the desert on July 16, 1945. The device, known simply as the gadget containing 13 pounds of plutonium, was hoisted onto a steel tower. When it detonated, evaporating the tower and turning the desert sand into green glass, later called Trinity, the scientists knew they had succeeded. Inside the bunker, the atmosphere was a disturbing mix of relief and terror. Less than 1 month later, theory turned into practice. On August 6, 1945, little boy fell on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Fat Man fell on Nagasaki. At first, Oppenheimer felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The weapon had worked. He had hoped it would be used against the Nazis. But with Germany already defeated, it was instead used to force Japan's surrender. But as reports of the devastation arrived, melting skin, vaporous bodies, radiation sickness, satisfaction turned into horror. When Albert Einstein heard the news, he reportedly said only one thing: "Woe is me." The war ended, but Oppenheimer's inner war had only just begun. He felt he had opened a Pandora's box that could never be closed. On August 17th, he traveled to Washington, personally delivering a letter to the Secretary of War, urging a ban on nuclear weapons. 2 months later, he stood in the Oval Office, face to face with President Harry Truman. Overwhelmed with guilt, Oppenheimer looked at the president and said, "Mr. President, I have blood on my hands." Truman was furious. He believed the bomb was a military necessity, one that saved countless American lives. To him, Oppenheimer's guilt was weakness. Later, Truman told his staff, "Don't let that crybaby in here ever again." Oppenheimer spent the rest of his life trying to restrain the monster he had helped create. He worked with the Atomic Energy Commission, pushing for international control of nuclear weapons. When the idea of the super, the hydrogen bomb, emerged in 1949, Oppenheimer strongly opposed it. He feared a weapon 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. But his opposition made him enemies. During the paranoia of the Cold War, his old left-wing associations were turned against him. In a humiliating security hearing, his clearance was revoked. The man who gave America the bomb was cast out, branded a security risk. Edward Teller, a former colleague and strong supporter of the hydrogen bomb, took his place in the spotlight. In 1952, America tested the hydrogen bomb, ignoring Oppenheimer's warnings. The legacy: J. Robert Oppenheimer retreated into academia, a shadow of the man who once commanded the most secret project in human history. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize 3 times, but never won. A chain smoker to the end, he died of throat cancer in 1967 at the age of 62.